Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Salam.
This is your brother Nafis Abu Zaid. I'm here with my co-host.
This is your brother Aqil Ingram.
And this is your brother Abdul Haq Baker.
Alhamdulillah, welcome to another episode. I believe this is episode 6 to the Fajr Club with our esteemed host. And we're continuing with the framework that was put together and composed and developed by our illustrious co-host, Dr. Abdul Haq Baker. And we are on the third cognitive model, which is the adulthood, which we call the foundational Muslim. And hopefully we elaborate today on that. We let Brother Abdul Haq Baker give us a little insight into this particular frame stage of this cognitive model, and then we elaborate like we normally do. Inshallah.
Bismillah. Thank you. Jazakallah khair, Brother Nafis. As everyone knows, we looked at the first two of the four-stage cognitive framework that I developed, and we looked at the vulnerable, abstract sort of stages that were there. When we progress and proceed, which many of us are doing or have done, to the adult stage, which is, I term, the foundational stage. Why? Because there's a reflection upon the previous two stages, and also the life experiences have developed by this particular stage. Okay, remember we spoke about the fact that there's no specific time frame to each of the stages. But when you embark upon the adult stage, the foundational stage, you are now looking at actualized experiences and understandings of the deen. You've been in the deen long enough for that hype stage, the idealism, making some of the mistakes, having very basic understandings without the application of the knowledge that you've learned, or the misapplication of the knowledge that you've learned because of this overzealousness, this idealism, this lack of experience of how to practice Islam, the new faith, within the context of the society or the community or environment that you're living in. So this foundational stage now is you reflecting, readjusting aspects of your earlier beliefs, building more comprehensively upon those beliefs in order to practice a more contextualized behavior within the society now, being more comfortable with the religion and its requirements, and you being more comfortable in yourself as an individual, as a Muslim. So that's why it's the adult stage. You are maturing, it's maturation. Now, yes, there's the final mature stage, which we will look at as it relates to wisdom and looking outwardly now and expounding the first three stages of knowledge. But this stage is an adult stage, is a stage of maturation. And the first stage, or the embedding of actualization of practice and understanding, as opposed to abstract understanding, taking understandings and thinking we need to practice the way they do in the Middle East, the way they do in Asia, the way they do in Africa. We are now able to actualize how to practice within the context of American society, British society, Western society.
Yeah, and just to add some more color to that, and I believe I'll be mostly echoing what you're saying. Um, at this stage, the individual comes into self-discovery, and I'll mention what I mean by that. So when we're first coming into the faith and we're learning things, you're reading things, you are around the community, you have teachers, you develop this ideal of how you think things should be theoretically, but then you have some experiences. You're around the community, you see some things that go right, you see some things that go left. You get married, right? You have children. You have to function with non-Muslims in society that you live in, and then after a while, you build up these experiences, and then you have to fit what was once theory into these experiences. Sometimes it matches, sometimes it doesn't, and it forces you to rediscover yourself and be comfortable inside of your faith practice at the same time, right? So then in that space, it brings you to a point where you can begin independent thought. right? Independent thought, of course, within the confines of our legislation, and with the guidelines of our legislation, but independent thought, nevertheless.
No.
I think you've in mashallah, you beautifully put, brother Akil. You've crowned what I've said much more eloquently. Jazakallah khair.
No. I just want to touch on some key things in regards to the differentiation between maturity in Islam and when do a person actually mature in Islam. Is this tied to or associated with age? Is it tied to and associated with experience? Is it tied to and associated with how long a person have accepted Islam, have been practicing Islam? Is all of these things coupled in it? Because I know within this stage we say the foundational Muslim or the adult Muslim, right? And I also understand that just because someone's been in Islam for a certain amount of years does not necessitate that that person has been practicing Islam or has been
Right.
studying Islam or properly understand Islam, right? So do we make a distinction there, or do we just include the fact that okay, he's been Muslim for 5 years, he's been Muslim for 10 years, he's been Muslim for 30, right? Uh, do we include all of that and say, you know what, this person has experience in regards to Islam, or he has mature or whatever? What you guys think?
Very good question, Nafisa. And I looked at that when I was applying this model in the intervention youth organization that I had. It was very clear that I needed to look at a socio-cultural aspect to each stage, socio-religious aspect to each stage, socio-academic level, all of these interrelated levels, because we had individuals who would come into the deen maybe at 40 years old, okay? And they would be at the founding stage with regards to knowledge and understanding and experience of Islam. But when we looked at the economic or the socio-cultural aspect, they were veterans in life. They had life experiences that placed them at the adult stage or the mature stage. So this is where the framework then branches out. So when dealing with such an individual, let's stick with that example, he would be or she would be infused with knowledge and teachings from the founding stage, okay? Because we would identify that that's where their religiosity, their religious understanding was starting at. But we wouldn't treat them like they were children by way of age or teenagers by way of age. We had to take into consideration these are mature, experienced adults with life experiences that have been actualized experiences, having children, married, divorced, everything they would have gone through in the years there. So what we would have to do is deal with them, showing them examples from the seerah of Sahaba and of those who came to the deen in similar experiences as they did, but how those stages of religious learning were embarked upon and the level of intellect and maturity that was required to engage with them. Whereas so for example, we would not have them in our community sitting in a class of 15-year-olds, 20-year-olds. We would be dealing with them like the adults according to physiological, mental paradigms and understandings were. We would treat them, they would be in classes of peers of equal age because of those life experiences, because of those maturation, even if it meant that we were teaching them at the very founding fundamental stages of the deen because of their newness in that way. Then you would have another, flip it the other way.
I'll probably have to play devil's advocate with you there.
No, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
And I don't mind that. So this is why we're discussing. Then you have a younger individual who has been on the deen. They've grown on the deen. Our children, for example, they've been going to the madrasas. They've been exposed to all of the knowledge. So we see that their knowledge of the deen in itself is maybe at the youthful or even adult stage with regards to maintaining their 5 daily salah. They may have performed Hajj. They've done Ramadan since childhood and everything. But with regards to their cultural, socio-economic situation, they are not at the adult stage. They are at the founding stage as it relates to life experiences, as it relates to going out into the world. So you can see where this dichotomy now comes, and you'll see the overplay and the overlapping of these stages in one individual. depending on these aspects that I've mentioned: socio-religious experience, socio-cultural, socio-academic, socio-economic. They are not all
political.
They can socio-political, absolutely. So they're not, as you said, it's a very good question. Do you treat them in the adult stage as we see sociologically in the Western paradigm? Is there religious aspects? We know what maturity is as it relates to the religion. Who are Rijal and who are Shabab in that particular instance? How do we treat them? You cannot just use that and say, adult stage, everything applies, and we're going to treat you in that way. Because that opens up, there may be mental problems, there may be mental health issues that are there as well, psychological issues. So it's not a one size fits all when you're dealing with this particular framework.
Brother Akil?
I'm waiting on your devil's advocate, brother. Let's have at it.
No, what I was saying is that, okay, so when you're mentioning that having someone meet a social standard, like whether it's social culture, social, social economics, and that they should be in a class setting with those of their peers, right? And not in a class setting with those who are younger than them that might not be at the same level, right? However, I beg to differ here because the Prophet ﷺ had youth and he also had older people in his class setting, right? Keeping in mind the measuring stick that Islam lays out to keep that from over blending each other is what is called ihtiram. And Brother Akil can probably help me out here. Is a level of ihtiram. The Prophet ﷺ has a beautiful hadith when he talks about even picking imam, right? In Rahu Sahih Muslim. It comes in Muslim when he talks about picking the person who is more aqra, yani fi kitabillah, right? Who's most read or well read in the Book of Allah. And then he goes down and lay down who was more knowledgeable in the Sunnah, right? Showing us this type of precedence or seniority, if you will, right? And he mentioned about 5 different things according to the narration. He mentions, like we said, being well read, what they say, afqahu, right, more fiqh, right? Being the person who knows the Sunnah more, person who made hijrah first, right? Who made hijrah before the other individual. He mentioned the person who entered Islam before, right? And then he mentioned sin. He mentioned age, right? So these 5 things shows us a level of respect that is given, okay? And that's, I think, what you're honing in on. Instead of putting them in a peer class where they have to be in the same class, no, they could be in there with youth, but it still should be a level of respect that is disseminated between each parties. What you think, Brother Akil?
Before Brother Akil responds, I'm going to come back on that. I think that's beautiful that you gave that, and it's very important for our audience and participants to hear this because that's accurate.
That's but right. Now, push back.
Looking at that now, that is somewhat of an idealism until we know that we have that context in which to implement that. Because we also have from the deen where the Prophet ﷺ taught us, and we saw from the Sahaba, that when they were speaking to a particular people of particular rank, they would speak to them specifically, privately, whereas if it was another type of people, they would speak to them in a different context. So when we're looking at individuals they may be at the adult phase with regards to their socio-economic, socio-cultural, but socio-religious, what we don't want to do is undermine their well-being and their self-esteem that you've come to the deen, but you are in a context and level with the youth, especially based on the experience that they've got. So it would be speaking to them in the context of their achievements within that society. Now, if what you're saying was within an Islamic society that's established, then I would say no problem, because we see that. I've seen it in Saudi Arabia. I've seen it in the classes. But when we're looking at that within a Western context, that mentality and mindset is not there with such individuals until they've had development and inculcation in the deen. So if you're dealing with an elder who's coming to the deen at that age with those experiences, and we try to tell him what you've mentioned here, that you will be sitting with the 7-10-year-old who's versed and everything like that, or the 15-year-old or the 18-year-old, this will be something that could actually detract from the individual wanting to continue to engage or grow in the deen, because he will then perceive I'm being treated like a child, and my life experience and where I've come from is not being taken into consideration. Again, I'll end on this point by repeating everything you said is in its place, but within a Western context with such individuals, this is somewhat of an idealism at this stage until they become more versed in the deen like we have been, where we are happy to sit with and learn from a child, a youth, because we recognize those 5 stages that you have highlighted. But until that is done, I think that in the initial stages, to deal with that immediately, I think will be quite harsh, and an abrupt awakening for an individual to say your life experiences really don't count for nothing or very little, because your deen aspect is here at the founding stage.
Well, I would look to further this by saying, um, we do learn that there is appropriation based on where a person is and the meeting that person where that person is actually at, and grouping that person with like individuals. I'll give a few brief examples of what I mean, and I'll try to use examples that I believe everyone is familiar with. We can look at the chapter of victory, Surah An-Nasr. And if we look into the exegesis of this chapter, we enter into the story of Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, and he will be a part of a gathering with the adult men, and he would bring Ibn Abbas to this gathering. Now, the first point here is that the other adults that were there, because Ibn Abbas was younger than this batch, um, they had issue with Umar bringing Ibn Abbas there because he wasn't an adult, right? He wasn't an adult, and he wasn't there for adult discussion. Um, or he wasn't expected to be on level to have adult discussion. So Umar asked them about the meaning of this chapter, and they mentioned their answers. And then Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him and his father, of course, mentions that this chapter is indicative of the passing of the Messenger of Allah coming near. And then Umar utilizes that to prove to them that yes, this is a general rule where we will have appropriation of similar folk, but we can make certain exceptions at times, right? Also, we can look to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we look to the 10 who are promised paradise. When we look to the 10 that are promised paradise, we don't necessarily ask why are they distinguished as such, because there were others mentioned by name as well outside of those 10, right? Hassan Hussein, Thabit ibn Qais, Fatima. There are others. You can go down a list of many others that were mentioned by name to have paradise. So then why these 10, right? From the reasons is that these 10 governmentally were the cabinet of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? They were his private council, and they were the batch by way of which leadership was to be chosen after him. So he identified this particular set for their appropriate qualities, and he would interact with them in a way that he would not interact with others, right? We also can look to the different battles that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu was involved in. There were those amongst the youth that he would not allow to participate until a certain age or until certain qualities. And on the other end, you have, for example, he wouldn't allow individuals to participate in certain battles unless they already participated in a battle previous, like occurred with the Battle of Uhud, right? For example. So ultimately, we have the prophetic tradition, albeit with some discussion, but nevertheless, the statement itself is a true statement. Nazil an-nas min naziluhum, to place the people in their appropriate places.
No, barakallahu fiqh. That appropriation is something that is actually distinguished, and you brought the examples beautifully illustrated.
I think we might be losing you a little bit.
Yeah, you've frozen on us, Nafis.
Well, we'll give him a few more seconds, but I know you you were mentioning a point right before, or wanted to mention a point right before I mentioned my point, Dr. Baker.
No, I think what you said has been beautifully put, Akil, and I think it speaks to what we have both been saying, because that exception, the exceptions you've quoted, and the example of Ibn Abbas, I think, is a fantastic example. There's also the one of Ibn Umar when he was with his father, and when the Prophet ﷺ asked which tree most resembles the Muslims, or the Muslims most resemble, and the Sahaba were all giving the name, and we saw Ibn Umar remained silent until he had left with his father. This is in Bukhari. And he said to his father, "Oh, father, I know what the answer was," because none of them answered it. When even after the meeting had finished, and he said it was the palm tree. And Umar ibn al-Khattab and said how pleased and proud he would have been had Umar ibn Umar mentioned this in the gathering, because it was his son. It was a source of pride. So the fact that Ibn Umar didn't mention it, because of his knowing his place, or feeling his place in that instance, I think is yet another example. As you've said, it's dependent on the context. But one key factor in what you've mentioned there, all of the gathering was Sahaba. They were established in the deen. What we're discussing at this juncture are newcomers to the deen who, while being at the adult phase, because of their newness to the religion, are at the founding, cognitive, rudimentary stage. So therefore, we're not talking about seasoned, established Muslims here. If it's seasoned, established Muslims, there's absolutely no issue with everything and the context and the examples that have been given. But here we're talking about new Muslims further along that stage of the cognitive model, so far as everything but religion. Then we need to take into consideration the audience and the gathering within which they are taught the founding and the founding stage requirements and prerequisites.
And that's what
I'm going to mention a couple of examples briefly, and I know you froze up there, Nafis, and I want you to be able to repeat the entire of your point that we missed. But an example here is let's say when we were in the University of Medina, let's say, right, and there were certain individuals who their high school diplomas weren't accepted by the university, so because of that, they had to go to the high school after the Arabic program, right? And in certain rare instances, we had certain individuals that had to go through the middle school. Now, while it was very beneficial for them, it was also very tough for them to get through that because they're in class with kids. and everyone didn't get through that, right? Everyone didn't get through that. This also happens in the Azhar model as well, because generally speaking, anybody that applies to Azhar is not going to reject you regardless of your age. But the way that their model is, Arabic program, high school, and then you go to college, right? Regardless of what your degree is, right? You can test out, but you have to go. And there are a lot of adults that they just can't stay in class with the teenage kids doing teenage kid stuff, and they drop out, right? And they just drop out because they can't handle it that way, right? So there is something to the point that you're making, Dr. Baker. Nafis, your point?
Yeah, no. I understand. I understand the point that he's mentioned about about appropriation, but I still wanted to be honest, even in the Western society, just to piggyback on what you were just saying. When you go to like a program,
Horseback, no pork.
Yeah, right. The horseback on what you were saying. When you go into a Western educational system and you're at the age or adult age, they don't put you with all adults. They're going to put you in there also with you. You understand what I'm saying? Even if you're taking a GED program, even if you're going to take whatever, you're going back to college, whatever, they don't say, well, I'm going to place you with all of your peers and I'm going to place you with all of your peers. No, they're going to let their curriculum and their system run the way it's ran or conducted, right? My thing is that Islam counterbalanced that by ihtiram, which I would like you guys to harp on. That respect should be given. It's not a point of just saying identifying people by their social standing. Islam didn't have to do that. The Prophet didn't say I have to identify you as a chief. I got to identify you as such and such. Even though he took acknowledgement of that himself, right? He still didn't say I'm going to make this a standout stick. No, I'm going to show ihtiram. Because you're a chief, I'm going to speak to you in this way. Because you are such and such, I'm speaking to this way. And this is what I think Brother Abdul Haq Baker is saying, but what I wanted to add out is that we don't have to align classes like that. Whereas though now I have to put my social group with my social group. I don't see that in Islam. We don't have to do that, but we do should have ihtiram. Respect should also be given. Inshallah. I don't know what you
I think we're all talking within the same direction. What I would say, and Brother Nafis, that would be ideal. But let's look at where we are now. We are seen now more as the old school, even though we have older school than us now. And let's look at what has happened between the generations and continues to happen between the generations, especially in the Western construct, Western environment. We don't see it as much. It exists in the more culturally Arab, Asian, African communities, but we are seeing a breakdown and lack of respect of the youth as they believe they've gained knowledge, and then they start becoming ostentatious and haughty and disparaging of their elders who may not have studied in the Jamia or anything like this, or acquired the Arabic to the degree that they did. I remember when I came to the deen, we did the same with our elders, because and I think this is the value system amongst us as black people has been destroyed from slavery, and we've been trying to reclaim it, but not knowing how to do that right up until where we are now. And then when we come into the deen, we have all of those values there, but we've been practicing those values with an Arabized hat or a culturally appropriated hat, discarding any existing cultural aspects that our parents may have raised us with, whether we were raised in single parent homes or with both of our parents there. And so we start again, and that's when we start using Islamic tenets and use them in abstract and throw them like darts at each other and at our elders, silencing our elders with ayat, hadith, statements of scholars and ulama that maybe our elders are unfamiliar with and cannot argue with, because they've become attuned and accustomed to respecting whatever comes to us from the Quran and the Sunnah, having humility to hearing that, unlike the younger generation. So when you've got that happening, and we've seen youngsters humiliate elders using the deen. So that's why within the context that we're discussing at the moment, again, I will beg to differ slightly and say, this is very good, that's what you've highlighted, but it is an ideal that we have to strive to achieve, because it doesn't exist now. I'm not talking about class system. Like you said, no, Islam removed all of that. But what I'm saying is that when I'm looking at this model, when I'm looking at individuals coming into the deen in the West, I'm looking that they are coming with particular baggage, they're coming with particular esteem from where they've come, even if it's ranked with age. You and I both know our generations, if someone was a year older than us back in the day, 6 months older than us, we gave him props. We never said boo to him by virtue of the fact that he was a few months, a few days, a few years older than us. That's disappeared with the younger generations. In fact, they want to bring down and denigrate others, to step on their shoulders, to say, look at where I've stepped, which is higher than this individual you once used to respect. Until that's addressed with tarbiyah, okay, then we have to be very careful about imparting knowledge to the parties that we are imparting knowledge to, because we even saw in Medina, we've even seen in the sittings with Sheikh Rabi', I've been in them, where someone younger is being given acknowledgement by the Sheikh, and he's suddenly elevated above those who've been more established. And you would know that reality more than us in the UK, with what I've seen happen with some of those who are seasoned in the dawah in America, and how they were dealt with by individuals who didn't even graduate, but picked up the Arabic and were in front of the Sheikh's face enough for him to have familiarity with him and to rise in the ranks in America, and then start discarding and disparaging elders who had built communities, who had built in America. So that reality is what we're looking at now. And the framework that you've mentioned, the religious framework, which is beautiful, is perfect, the Prophet ﷺ taught us, it's not being applied. It cannot be applied.
Take a step back. But but you're still overlooking something. The individual obligation upon any person who's learning knowledge, and me and Akil talked about this in the other episode where we went over those stages. Akil broke down reaching the level of knowledge and then application and then wisdom and so forth. You have to look at the person who's learning. A lot of the youth that learn, either their intention can get contaminated, either their sincerity becomes contaminated. They reach a level of arrogance, ostentation. They actually reach that level. So they become arrogant. They don't respect their elders. They don't respect those who preceded them. This is not something that we say that we don't address or we don't acknowledge. But then at the flip side, we shouldn't turn around and say that, we're going to look at as if trying to apply what Islam already laid down as if this might be a little bit abstract. I don't think that. I think honestly, if you take a look at those narrations I was bringing to you, they apply with whether in the Western construct or Eastern construct. They're the same.
So what stage? At what stage?
At what stage?
Yeah.
The level of respect need to be taught. First and foremost, I was going to lead to another thing. When I was asking y'all earlier about when do we understand maturity in Islam? There is an age of maturity in Islam, right? There is an age.
Right.
The age is actually 40. Allah talks about it. Ibn Abbas talks about it in the Hadith. The Prophet ﷺ talks about it as well. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of Muslims today don't understand that age or that milestone. When you reach that milestone, they don't understand what that means. What does it mark? Or that level of respect. They don't. I just think they need to be reminded, retaught, always asked out about showing that respect. I'll let Brother Akil go in now.
So what you're saying is at that point, the brothers start opening doors for him, let him sit in the front seat. That's what you're saying? That's what I'm saying.
The Prophet ﷺ taught us that when he did what? When you walk when he walked with his daughter, what would he do? How would he walk beside her? Or how would he let her walk in front? What did the companions do? What Abdullah ibn Umar said? What Umar ibn Khattab said. When you're walking with your father, you don't precede him. When you do this adab still needs to be taught. If you look at this, he said that we was taught etiquette before, like we was taught Quran. Right. So I think that need to be harped on more, so that when the youth are with their quick minds and their learning, they realize that they have to have still proper adab. They still have to have proper etiquette. And a lot of people that learn nowadays that we're seeing, the etiquette goes out the door. So when they're learning with the sheikh, they might be learning with the sheikh because of the fame the sheikh has, the name the sheikh has, the status the sheikh has. But they're not taking from the sheikh character. They're not taking from the sheikh adab. This is not what they're leaving with. You get what I'm saying? They're leaving with something totally else. I was at Sheikh Rabia's house. Sheikh Rabia is the flag bearer of Jahwa Ta'adil. Guess what? That means if I see something, I got a red flag, I'm going to spot you out. Yeah, I told you, and it goes like that. You get what I'm saying?
And you know what, Nafis, what you said, which is beautiful, sticking with the cognitive model, if the youth have been raised upon those etiquettes that you've so beautifully described, and the environment is conducive to them sitting in the classroom, sticking with that example of the elder who's just come to the dean. The elder seeing that, initially having that haughtiness and why am I sitting with the child and everything like that, that young person can become a cause of reflection of that elder, of his socio-cultural founding stage when he was a non-Muslim, she was a non-Muslim, and how they behaved in comparison to what they're seeing of someone of like-minded age, similar age, as a Muslim. So that can happen. Not only the religious side, they're like, I'm 40, I'm sitting with a 15, 20-year-old, his or her behavior is so impressive that I'm reflecting on what I was like at that age, and it becomes another cognitive opening and learning alongside the dean. That's when it's attuned, when that can happen. And that's what we should be striving for with the youth and with those new elders who are coming in. I still believe it's ideal. I think it's something to be worked towards, but it's something that we should be looking at doing, nevertheless.
No, I concur. Mashallah, I concur, brother. I'm going to keep pushing, but I concur.
Akil, what do you think?
No, no, I think we reached a degree of consensus. I would forward a question though. Um, so okay, so no contest on the discussion concerning etiquette, right? Concerning the epistemology of knowledge, right, in its track and faith development. No contest concerning that discussion. I suppose my question to you, Nafis, to kind of level this out, would be the individual who is an adult yet new to the faith. How should that person be treated in that person's rearing into the faith? That's my question for you.
No, I think just to agree with Brother Abdul Haq Baker, I believe that whatever teacher that is in front of this individual should take in consideration the status, the position, the understanding or level of understanding of this individual because it's going to help better making the dawah more effective, right? So even if he's 40, for example, or is he 52, for example, right? Then you probably wouldn't teach him the same way you would just teach. And that's what I think the Harpicker was getting at. You probably wouldn't teach him the same way you would teach someone who was more younger than him. So you probably would take a different approach, taking into consideration the level that that person is at. I still think that, the youth, it is a barrier. The youth need to be taught etiquettes more than teaching them knowledge in the beginning. And that plays a part in the teacher. And this is why it's very important. Back then, you know what I'm talking about. When you sit in front of a certain imam or a certain scholar that have a certain aura about them, you know what I mean? They have adab, they're strong in regards, not just their knowledge. What do you get from them? It exudes from them, right? You're going to get it. You feel this certain respect that you're going to have for the sheikh, right?
Dignity.
Say it again.
Dignity.
Dignity. You get what I'm saying? And you're not going to approach him any type of way, and you're going to learn from him.
And I think I want you to continue. I think we may have lost Dr. Baker here. He may have frozen.
Dohak, is you there?
Either that or he's
frozen.
he's holding his disposition very, very well. but
No,
go ahead.
no,
He'll come back. Go ahead.
Now, inshallah, he come back. He did froze. But you understand what I'm saying? So
yeah.
I think that dignity still need to be there with the teachers. And then I think in regards to that, the elders, he's gonna come back in, inshallah. The elders need to understand that at their journey of learning, at their beginning stage, right? They still have a development process that they have to take on too. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not going to be so easy for them that, and I know it, to study next to a person who's like 15 years younger than them. You understand? But they're going to have to say, okay, I'm going to swallow this pill, right? And I'm doing this for the sake of Allah. And I'm going to learn, even if I have to learn next to someone who's younger than me, right? And if we can try to work on that, bridging the gap between the youth and the elders. You know what I'm saying? I think that's what this second stage is so much about and why they went aloof, because the youth started to break away and disrespect the elders as if their status doesn't mean nothing. Their seniority, them preceding them in Islam, them preceding them in different things, social or economically or education. You know what I'm saying? All of these different things were just discarded. No, you don't have the knowledge of hadith. You don't have the knowledge of Quran. You don't know the terminology. You're nothing. I think that's totally blatant disrespect, and that's a disrespect to the knowledge that they claim to actually possess.
And on the other side, on the other side. Well, before I say this, I just want to say that you said exactly what I wanted you to say. I wanted Dr. Baker to hear you saying that, just so that we can see that we all really saying the same thing. We're just speaking about it from different sides of the same thing, right?
Okay.
But we can reiterate that when he comes back. But to your point that you're making now, and on the other side as well, with some of our brothers that are older and more life experience. You don't understand money. You don't know how to run the masjid. You don't know how this works, and so there has to be a coalescence from both sides.
Right? No, and it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And you utilize that strength. So if you know that the elders has preceded you, they very well established economically I mean, economically, whether, social culture, they're well established. Why not utilize that? Why not defer to them in that regard? If they know how to better maintain things, like you said, administration, then let them run it. It shouldn't be we're going to chase the administration away because they don't know certain terminologies or haven't studied in a certain way. No, they still have certain qualities about them that they know how to run. Because if we do that, it's going to be chaos, which we have seen. A bunch of youth getting in positions that they are not even qualified to actually run. You understand? All because they feel as though they add a level of knowledge, quote unquote. And so they chase away the elders who actually know how to maintain. You know what I'm saying? Like what you're saying, who know how to do administration runs, who know how to make sure things are going to be actually established, who know how to make sure the bill is going to actually be paid. This is going to actually run this way. You know what I mean? How to establish those connections. I don't think that we should throw that away. Abdul Haq Baker said the site had crashed. So,
okay. Yep, and maybe a connection issue in the general vicinity where he is.
Yeah. All right, what I would like to do, because it's 8 o'clock, if we can I post some of the stuff that some brothers have pasted up here? I think there was alignment and agreement with what we had. Brother Abdul Baker said he's going back on the link. He did say that, but however, he doesn't see us there. Yeah, we have some tough technical difficulties, brothers and sisters.
Okay, our dear brother Sheikh Abdul Qadir Abdul Khaliq, he states here, to Aqil's point about the Azhar system, that is exactly my experience, and there was a lot of failure due to it. As far as respect, while it should always be present, that is a separate issue from what is the most effective learning environment for different levels of people. A Friday khutbah is more general than a classroom setting.
Go ahead, brother Akil.
That's true. I concur, doctor. He also says here. We just lost.
No. You got that. So you concur with that. Okay.
Yeah, there was a further point, a second point.
I gotta find it. Let me see.
That he was making there.
All right. So Akil point. Okay.
Yep, it was right after that one.
Yeah, I see this, but I don't see the other one.
Okay, he was saying something to the effect of to the social. That's all I saw of it.
Say it again.
It says something to the effect of to the social or something social. That's the first part that I saw of it before it faded out.
Oh, the social. Yeah, he posted that.
Okay. He further states the social and cultural dynamic in Arabian society and its construction in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba, the companions radiallahu anhum, was very different than ours, and that's true. That's true. That's true. Now, I think because of where we are, and you can speak to this as well, Nafis. I think because of where we are in our development of Islam, it's not exactly the Meccan period. It's not exactly the Medini period that we can parallel what we're experiencing to that, but maybe more one than the other. And I think definitely we're more inclined to the Meccan period than we are the Medini period, where we are in the West. Definitely in America. Our British brothers are probably 2 to 3 generations ahead of us in their development of Islam in their country. But yes, I say that I agree with Sheikh Abdul Qadir's point, right? But I think we will be extracting many more lessons from the Meccan experience of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions than we would be from the Medini experience, because we're not fully established yet, and we're not integrated fully into this country yet when it comes to our social spiritual practice.
No.
Okay, we have the Muslim chaplain, our dear brother, Chaplain Antigua. Assalamu alaikum. And we say first, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, before we forget to return the salam to you. Can you incorporate the fact that the natural disposition or personality traits of Abu Bakr and Umar, for example, didn't essentially change after embracing Islam. This is actually interesting, for a myriad of reasons, to be honest with you. But yes, so Islam does not change who you are. Islam doesn't change your personality. It further improves and enhances who you are. So you don't have to take another individual and become a carbon copy of someone else, right? That you look up to. That's not necessarily the case, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he has mentioned خيرهم خيرهم في الجاهلية خيرهم في الإسلام إذا فقهوا, right? The best of them in the pre-Islamic stage are the best of them in the Islamic stage if they acquire understanding, right, of the faith, if they acquire depth and understanding of the faith. So this speaks to the fact that Islam recognizes that we're not being asked to change who we are, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he interacted with the people this way. There was so much. He didn't change the language of his people. He didn't change the cultural foods of his people. He didn't change the cultural dress of his people. And many of their typical cultural practices, even in business, he didn't change. There was only when there was a cross section between culture and legislation that we're meant to choose legislation over culture, right? And to your point, with Abu Bakr and Umar, with Uthman, any one of the companions, that they have the qualities that we know that they had. Abu Bakr with his forbearance, Umar with his tenacity, Uthman with his modesty. These are qualities that remain with them after embracing the faith, even though they're qualities that can differ with one another, particularly when it's time to make strong decisions that will affect a large body of people. All this being true, though, what we do see, we do see, and this is maybe highlighted more so in Umar than the others, but what we do see with time, we do see a balance and a leveling out of those qualities. So as forbearant as Abu Bakr was, when he becomes the caliph and he has to make certain decisions concerning the Roman Empire, concerning the Syrian the Syrian occupation, he took very strong stances and wasn't as forbearant, right, as he once was, right. We see Umar, for example, may Allah be pleased with him. He starts to become much more leveled out and much more balanced, and having that same tenacity but withholding it, and then knowing where to place that tenacity instead of it being a constant throughout the entire of his personality. So those qualities were still there, but Islam enhanced that, and we hope the same thing for ourselves as well.
Barakallahu feek, Sheikh. One more, let me see here.
We have Abdul Shakur Muhammad. May Allah preserve you, my dear brother, and may Allah preserve that fur that it appears that you're wearing as well. Um, the majority in the West don't respect knowledge. This is why it has to be a reminder, or there has to be a reminder to the people on respecting knowledge. Um, agree with that a thousandfold. No contest. Yeah, agree with you. May Allah reward you. Poignant point. And we have the gallant Dr. Baker. He's back with us, huh? And this time
Yeah,
not in the double. He's become a
I'm not
singularity at
sure
this point.
what happened. I'm not sure because I saw you both drop off, and I was thinking all of us lost the signal. But I think it must have been just me. So I tried to get back in. I'm here. Alhamdulillah.
It was just you. Huh? Yeah, we were still rolling here.
Only me, mashallah. Alhamdulillah. Please carry on. I'll jump in on the thread that you're on, inshallah.
Excellent. So at this point, we're taking some of the questions and the comments from our brothers. We've taken about 4 thus far. I don't know if we have any more. We're on to the next one at this point. Nafis?
Yeah, I was looking at this here. I'm going to show it. I think there's another part to it.
Okay, our sister here, Kali Khadija Merritt, may Allah preserve you. She states, the establishment of balance between the generations is extremely important. A handoff of sorts. Many of the Prophet's companions were young, and he set a standard for this. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Allah knows best. What I would mention here is this speaks to leadership and a leadership model, right? The it can be said that the highest human act is to inspire. And we see that the highest level of leadership is not to garner followers, but the high level of leadership is to multiply the self and create new leaders. And we see a clear example of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam doing this in so many different areas, right? For example, it can be concerning different battles and who he would allow to be his lieutenant in a particular battle. He would alternate that. When they would leave the prophetic city of Medina, we would see that he would leave different people in his stead to oversee Medina. At times Uthman, at times Ali, at times others amongst the companions as well, and giving them training so that when it is time for them to come into their own, that they're fully prepared to do so. But definitely, Dr. Baker is back. We want to hear what you have to say to that. May Allah preserve you.
No, mashallah. Yet again, Sister Kali has come with a very comprehensive statement, which I think encapsulates what we've been discussing earlier on. And what we're seeing in our own communities, and I'm talking pre and post conversion, is a reluctance to hand over the reins of leadership to the youngers, to prepare them, to inculcate them, and to have trust of them on the one hand. And then on the other hand, what we were speaking about in more details earlier on were the younger ones having an impatience due to their exuberance, their over exuberance, and seeing that they are dissatisfied with the status quo and wanting to change that to an idealistic model. Let's be clear now, an idealistic model, because the model they see does not emulate what they have in their mind at the founding and youthful stage of the prophetic model. They cast aside the experiences and challenges that their elders have had. So therefore that impatience comes in, and you have friction between the young and the old. You have splitting, new centers being established, with the young going off and trying to set up this idealistic center, and then they themselves fall into problems because they realize it's not pure enough and we want it to be. And we see that fracturing taking place. So it comes back to what Sister Kali's saying, and it comes back to what you were saying, Nafis. Etiquette, character building should be done before entering the books, not of Aqidah, because that's very important, but before entering other jurisprudence, should I say, I'm getting my tongue tied, fiqh issues that have no bearing, immediate bearing, to the reality of the community at that particular point. So yes, once that harmonization is done, and it's something that must be continuous, then we will have that handover, as the sister is highlighting, and it will be smooth, transitional, like we saw with the young Sahaba assuming responsibilities from the elder Sahaba. That's only then will that be realized. But at least discussing it now, acknowledging it now, is the first step.
No. Barakallahu Feek. No, I agree with Dr. Abdul Baker. And just so you know, earlier we did agree with you when you froze up and you was out. We did agree with your point earlier. So we all speaking the same thing as Brother Akil mentioned. We're just coming at it from a different angle. And I do agree that there is, like I was saying, there is a gap between the youth and between the elders. And you had just eloquently put it so nice when you just said how they are impatient, exuberant, and they are pushing towards this as far as on the youth side. And then on the elder side, they are reluctant to pass over the torch and so forth. So I think, yeah, beauty there is there. That is that.
If we look at that in a macro problem, a macro situation, and we're not just confining it to Islam and amongst the, and we're not, and I'm saying, let's look at a black issue. Okay, look at Africa. Look at the African continent. Look at the takeovers that's just attempted in Burkina Faso and what's happening. There is this, and we know this comes back to the deen now. I said it's beyond. I'm not talking just about Islam at this point, but we come back to the deen when we look at the problems the Prophet ﷺ highlighted so eloquently, that the love of leadership, what an evil wet nurse, an evil weaner it is, because once you've tasted power, whether it's corrupted power, effective or ineffective power. You don't want to leave the seat. And we find, you can look on the African continent, you can look elsewhere, you can look in the West, look at Trump, you can look in the UK at the moment. Giving up power, handing over power can be difficult if the intention is incorrect and your concern is not for the welfare of your peers, your community. It's about your nafsi. And so us who have built, we want our legacy. Oh, I started this community. I achieved this. I connected us with the scholars. I want that to be recognized. We need to move away from that, because the current age that we're in, the social media age, which some of us have jumped upon as well ourselves, we're all about popularity. We're all about likes, subscriptions. And this is very, very dangerous and destructive. And it's against the manhaj of the Anbiya, because we know some will be coming with 1 follower, 0.
I beg to differ, brother.
No problem.
Honestly, because it's like I understand what you're saying. It's definitely dangerous, but again, we are toward the actions, and then that hadith is talking about actions of worship anyway. But actions of worship is, and needed are judged by intentions. So if we're going to utilize a tool, which social media becomes at this point, to give dawah, and it's a formidable tool, right? Then a part of that structure is, in order to utilize it, there are certain things that's going to happen, such as the like button, right? Such as having followers, subscriptions, right? Such as having all of these different things that are associated with it. I think the problem, though, what you're talking about, what we're afraid of, is doing these acts, which are highly noble acts and acts of worship, so solely for the full base of followers, subscriptions.
Right. That's what I mean.
Yes. But if you're doing it so that you can spread the dawah, and you're doing it in a proper manner according to your level, then that's no problem. You exclude it from that.
What you're saying is you've articulated.
No, because I see a lot of people, and Akil probably can speak to this. I see a lot of people take indirect shots at people on social media. They call them social media influencers, or not influencers, but social media students, and it's like a double connotation to me, because I'm thinking like, oh, okay, they don't supposed to utilize this platform to teach. At what point do they supposed to utilize? No, we should spread the dawah. We want everybody to spread the dawah according to the proper method, right?
I agree. That's a good qualification.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be that anybody that's on YouTube should be just grouped in with being an evil caller or someone who's ignorant and so forth. Allah knows best. But I appreciate everybody that responded. I appreciate the co-hosts for their time and for their wisdom and for their advice, and also for their instruction. Today was a beautiful conversation. There was a lot of other things that were mentioned that will have to be a separate concept, or a separate show episode. But I think for the most part, we touched on the foundational stage that Brother Abdul Haq was talking about. And really, I think in this stage, what he was saying is that you have to watch out that when you're mature enough, you have to understand that at a certain level, there is a difference in between the elders and the youth, and that the elders should have a working relationship with the youth by removing that reluctance, and that the youth should have a working relationship with the elders by removing the impatience and wanting to so have a pure Islam. They should have some type of harmony with themselves.
And Brother Nafis, if you don't mind mentioning, as we said when we were discussing outside of the group, it's important for the audience to know, why is the Fajr Club different? Yes, we're talking about a framework that I'd worked on and introduced. And as we proceed and progress, there are going to be other aspects, religious, academic, otherwise, that all of us may bring to the table. But why is this different? Because, like, for example, this framework, once we've completed the fourth stage, I'm going to be prepared to share in the WhatsApp group or the mediums where we've got the participants, those frameworks and aspects of my PhD and even my book with those who are participating now. So they will have that at their fingertips to pick apart, to disagree, to build upon. The Fajr Club is about not just discussion, it's about building and equipping ourselves with tools, ideas to go back into our communities, to reflect, and if we decide, implement aspects, modified or otherwise, or move in a different direction, but to have something that we have built upon in our conversations.
No, hopefully everybody benefited. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, and just let me add to that very, very briefly. For those that have become a part of our community, the Fajr Club community, we see your talking points, we see your suggestions, we see your questions, and all of that, and we want to be able to incorporate that into our discussion. So what we're looking to do is we want to set a foundation for this broader discussion. So this is why we're working through Dr. Baker's cognitive model, so that once we have that foundation, we can then take some of your thoughts and your concepts, your questions and suggestions, and then speak about that whilst utilizing this cognitive model as a base for our discussion, so that we can actually move the discussion forward. So after we have completed this cognitive model, we'll be coming back to revisit a lot of your suggestions and such, and move the discussion forward that way. So we definitely appreciate you. We see you, we hear you, and we'll be working with you as we move forward.
Okay, Tayyip, this is your brother Nafis Abu Zaid.
This is your brother Aqil Ingram.
This is your brother Abdul Haq Baker.
We thank you guys for tuning into the Fajr Club. Inshallah ta'ala, stay tuned for next week. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.